Imagine if one of humanity's most intelligent buildings wasn't constructed from stone, wood, or brick, but from living soil over hundreds of years. For a long time, people assumed Viking turf houses were merely basic shelters built by settlers who had exhausted their timber supplies. However, contemporary archaeological findings reveal a completely different reality. These dwellings were not indicators of hardship, they were incredible survival mechanisms. Their design focused on capturing heat, enduring powerful storms, and ensuring entire families survived some of the planet's most brutal winters. Remarkably, many of their concepts mirror techniques used in modern sustainable building. Today, we wonder how Viking settlers constructed homes that lasted centuries using mostly grass, earth, and a bit of driftwood. The answer starts on an island that transformed everything they thought they understood. When Norse settlers reached Iceland around AD 870, they thought they were starting a fresh chapter. They had left behind the recognizable fjords and forests of Norway. Before them lay an island few Europeans had ever inhabited, full of opportunity but also risk. What they encountered was entirely different from what they had anticipated. Iceland was stunning, yet harsh and relentless. Winter storms from the North Atlantic swept across the open terrain with almost nothing to block them. The winters were lengthy, dim, and intensely cold. Volcanic activity frequently altered the landscape, covering fields with ash and reminding every settler that the island was dynamic. Then came a crucial realization. The forests they had relied on for generations were largely absent in Iceland. Wood formed the basis of Viking existence. It constructed their renowned longships, supported their grand halls, and framed their homes, workplaces, and places of worship. Timber was not just a construction resource. It was the core of their society. But Iceland provided very little of it. Every usable tree held value, and each wooden beam needed to last decades. Broken wood was fixed rather than discarded. Old structures were carefully taken apart so their materials could be reused. Even driftwood that had traveled thousands of miles across the Arctic Ocean from Siberian rivers or North American forests was gathered like treasure. It was collected every time it washed up on Iceland's shores. Nothing went to waste. Every piece of wood represented survival. The settlers quickly grasped a harsh reality. They could not replicate Norway on this new island. The building customs that had guided their ancestors for centuries no longer suited their new environment. They faced two options: battle the landscape or adapt to it. The Vikings chose the latter. Instead of forcing the land to conform to their customs, they began observing the island itself. They examined its winds, its ground, its weather patterns, and the materials it naturally provided. What they didn't realize was that the answer to their biggest problem had been right under their feet all along. It had been patiently waiting for someone to recognize it, not as mere dirt, but as one of nature's most incredible presents: construction material. What seemed like simple earth was actually one of the most amazing building materials that nature had ever created for the early Viking settlers. It wasn't immediately apparent. Under every step lay a thick layer of Icelandic turf, a living mixture of tightly woven grass roots and moss. Volcanic soil, moisture, and centuries of decomposing organic matter gradually formed due to the island's chilly climate. This wasn't loose soil that fell apart in your hands. It was compact, resilient, and surprisingly robust. The more the settlers observed it, the more they understood that the land itself was providing a solution to their most difficult issue. Using long iron spades, they carefully cut large turf sections that remained intact. Much like oversized bricks, the interwoven root system served as a built-in support. Meanwhile, countless minuscule air pockets formed an insulating layer against the cold. Beneath its soft exterior lay a remarkable internal framework that today's engineers would identify as a natural composite material. The Vikings gradually converted the earth into walls, one layer at a time. These sturdy walls not only blocked the wind, but also reduced heat loss and dampened the force of harsh Atlantic storms. This produced an indoor environment that stayed remarkably consistent, even when temperatures dropped below freezing. Rather than fighting the weather incessantly, these dwellings cooperated with it. Today's archaeological tests have validated the system's efficiency. Research involving full-scale replicas and thermal analysis demonstrates that properly constructed turf homes held onto heat much more effectively than most would expect, enabling families to endure extended winters while consuming significantly less fuel compared to standard wooden houses of that era. Yet, finding turf was merely part of the answer. A wall with a thickness of several feet was also extremely heavy. Its weight grew even greater following heavy rain or snowmelt. Without adequate reinforcement, those hefty walls would slowly move, sink, and ultimately give way under their own mass. The roof contributed thousands more pounds, putting immense stress on all parts of the building. The Vikings realized that sturdy materials by themselves were insufficient for a durable home. Engineering was required, and the clever approach they devised worked so well that over a millennium later, across Iceland's terrain, archaeologists can still map the footprints of these extraordinary structures. For beneath each remaining turf dwelling lay a hidden foundation, a silent masterpiece that enabled all the rest. The Vikings never attempted to conquer Iceland's harsh climate. They grasped a deeper truth. The best survival strategy was to collaborate with nature, not oppose it, as they had done in Norway. In Norway, Viking houses rose prominently above the ground, held up by robust timber structures and sheltered by nearby forests. Iceland, however, provided no such cover. Over the open plains, fierce North Atlantic gales blasted the island with immense power, bringing freezing rain, snow, and volcanic ash. Wooden dwellings were vulnerable to every storm, prompting settlers to rethink their approach. They built lower instead of taller. They built lower. Many Viking homes were partly sunken into the ground, integrating the surrounding soil into the structure. From afar, these houses merged nearly invisibly with the terrain, looking more like soft, grassy hillocks than human constructions. This was not a design choice, but survival engineering. Embedding the house into the ground significantly cut down the wall area facing the wind. The adjacent earth functioned like a natural insulator, keeping interiors warmer during Iceland's severe winters and cooler in the short northern summer. Equally crucial, the ground stabilized the house against storms that would demolish more exposed constructions. In numerous respects, the terrain itself turned into an additional wall of the dwelling centuries before modern engineers discussed passive heating or earth-sheltered design. Viking builders, through pure observation and practice, had already uncovered one of its most powerful concepts. Yet each answer brought a fresh problem. A home encircled by soil faced continual dampness. Rainwater, melting snow, and wet soil risked undermining the heavy turf walls from underneath. If not addressed, the whole building would gradually become weakened. The Vikings had to keep the earth nearby but prevent water from seeping in. Their solution, simple and brilliant, formed the concealed foundation that enabled these extraordinary homes to last. For many hundreds of years, concealed underneath each Viking turf wall was the section of the dwelling that very few ever witnessed. Yet without that part, everything above would have perished. A meticulously crafted stone base. Instead of setting thick turf straight onto wet soil, Viking craftsmen initially arranged closely spaced stones over the structure's base. It was an impressively straightforward fix, but it tackled many issues simultaneously. The stratum of stone kept the walls apart from dampness seeping up from the ground, while forming natural runoff paths for rain. Melting snow also benefited. The outcome was remarkable. The sod stayed less moist, the walls remained more robust, and the whole structure grew steadily sturdier with each passing year. Present-day digs throughout Iceland keep uncovering such concealed bases at many ancient locations. Long ago, those turf walls vanished, taken back by the passage of time and the environment. However, the stone foundation still sits precisely where Viking constructors set it over a millennium ago, silently keeping the original shape of dwellings that once provided shelter for whole households. Such foundations convey a crucial narrative. Viking sod cottages were never intended as short-term refuge. These were thoughtfully designed buildings constructed to endure decades of severe climate, plus ongoing transformation. Yet even the toughest partitions and cleverest pedestals could not address one ultimate obstacle. The roof needed to withstand unyielding gales, torrential downpours. To conquer that issue of thick snowfall and icy winters annually, the Norse invented something genuinely extraordinary: a roof that didn't merely shelter the home, it merged into the very living terrain. The most remarkable aspect of a Viking turf house was not the thick walls guarding against the cold. It was the roof. From the outside, it seemed quite ordinary, a gentle incline blanketed in grass, fusing effortlessly into the Icelandic landscape. Yet underneath that living top layer was a clever feat of engineering, meticulously crafted to endure one of the planet's most severe environments. The construction started with a skeleton of wooden beams. Lumber was extremely rare in Iceland, so each rafter was precious. Craftsmen depended on precious driftwood transported over the North Atlantic via strong sea currents, together with the sparse native timber the island offered. Each plank was precisely positioned, forming a durable yet light frame. On top of those beams, they placed overlapping pieces of birch bark, naturally abundant in water-resistant oils. This birch bark created an efficient shield against rainfall and thawing snow, keeping the wood below safe from ongoing dampness. Only after that did the construction workers add the last stratum, heavy sections of live sod, meticulously organized until the roof turned into a thick quilt of soil and grass. However, the roof did not stay static. Nature kept constructing it. Every spring, new grass sprouted through the cover, moss gradually covered the inclines, and roots extended further down into the underlying strata, interlacing the sod until the roof grew more robust each coming season. Rather than gradually deteriorating, it transformed into a living element of the terrain. Seen from afar, numerous Norse farms nearly vanished into the undulating hills. A worn timber entrance or a slender trail of smoke ascending into the air was the only sign that households dwelled below the verdant ground. That was not concealment. It was intentional survival. The sod roof retained valuable warmth within the house. It soaked up torrential rain, reduced the impact of fierce ocean gales, and contributed sufficient mass to hold the building securely in place through harsh winter tempests. The dwelling no longer existed separate from the environment. It merged with it, but even the most excellent roof and the heaviest partitions could only retain heat. They could not generate warmth for that purpose. Each Norse household relied on the same essential element, a solitary flame blazing at the center of the home. At the core of each Viking sod cottage, a lone fire blazed. It was much more than just a source of heat. It served as the hub of household existence, the spot where every morning started and every evening concluded. The fireplace prepared meals, dried wet garments, and thawed cold hands. It also illuminated the house during Iceland's perpetual winter night. Most importantly, it sustained entire families. When the outdoor environment turned nearly unbearable, all activities centered around its radiance. Along the walls were wooden benches that functioned as seats during daytime and sleeping places at night for parents, children, grandparents, and hired help. Travelers escaping storms also shared the hall, crowding as near to the flames as possible to stay warm. Tales were exchanged, implements mended, and fleece spun into fabric. Food was cooked, and children drifted off to sleep to the familiar noise of sizzling embers. The hearth was far more than a mere part of the dwelling. It was the home's core. However, the very features that made these houses so cozy also introduced a hazardous compromise. The thick sod walls and grass-covered roof efficiently trapped precious warmth, but they also confined smoke. During intense winter storms, opening the roof vent excessively could let in icy gusts or snowdrifts, chilling the interior within a short time. To shield the fire, many households kept the vent as tiny as possible. They permitted a thin haze of smoke to accumulate under the rafters day after day. Modern archaeological digs reveal that heavy soot still clings to the remaining beams of Viking turf houses, proving that smoke was an inescapable part of everyday existence. Experts think that years of inhaling this smoky air might have caused lasting breathing issues for numerous early Icelandic inhabitants. The fireplace provided heat, nourishment, and survival itself. Yet each breath subtly reminded them that existence in medieval Iceland always required a price outside. Outdoors, the freezing wind could cause death within moments. Indoors, the smoke extracted its own hidden cost. A Viking turf house was merely one component of an extensive survival strategy. Around the main hall were smaller structures, each with a dedicated role. These included storage rooms stocked with dried fish, smoked mutton, grain, and preserved dairy. There were workspaces where wool was transformed into clothing, and tiny shops where driftwood and metal were crafted into tools. Animal sheds were often constructed nearby, so the warmth from sheep, goats, and cattle could help heat the entire farmstead. In the winter, many such buildings were linked by covered walkways or placed just a few strides apart. This was crucial during blizzards, because visibility could fade in an instant, and stepping outside for even a brief period could be lethal. By grouping the buildings tightly, families could move among them with much less cold exposure. Each construction served a function, each space supported another, and all together formed a self-sufficient arrangement intended to endure months of seclusion. Despite their complexity, these farms all shared a surprising feature. Externally, they looked almost identical. This likely influenced Icelandic society in unexpected ways. In Norway, influential families exhibited their wealth through huge wooden halls, decorated columns, and grand architecture. In Iceland, the natural world eliminated such disparities. Whether a person was a powerful chieftain or just a simple farmer, most households lived under grass-covered roofs made from the same turf and stone. Seen from a distance, one house appeared much like any other. The weather paid no attention to social standing, the wind ignored riches, and the cold affected everyone equally. Success depended more on a family's unity than on the size of its home, the condition of their livestock, and their ability to prepare for the coming winter. Some historians argue that this harsh environment quietly reshaped Icelandic culture. Cooperation became as important as authority, and practical skills often outweighed displays of wealth. The landscape forced humility upon everyone. Those who adjusted, lived. Those who resisted, vanished. Yet the most astonishing aspect of these dwellings was not found by the Norse. It came to light almost a millennium later, as archaeologists and engineers started posing an extraordinary inquiry. Could these modest-looking structures have been far more advanced than their era? Over many generations, Norse turf homes were regarded as basic refuges constructed from need. Contemporary studies reveal a contrasting narrative. Today, archaeologists, builders, and climate engineers acknowledge these dwellings as outstanding instances of design tailored to climate. Heat retention was enhanced by thick sod walls, while roofs blanketed with earth offered organic thermal protection. Additionally, foundations sunk partially into the ground, leveraged the Earth's consistent temperature to mitigate severe climate impacts. Every element was utilized, every component had a function, and all parts of the dwelling functioned cohesively as an integrated system. Recent experimental reconstructions have demonstrated the remarkable efficiency of these structures. Well-constructed sod homes stayed astonishingly warm, withstood fierce North Atlantic gales, and needed notably less fuel for warmth compared to various early timber houses. What previously seemed crude now seems extraordinarily advanced. Present-day architects even examine these homes for inspiration regarding eco-friendly construction, energy conservation, and collaborating with the environment rather than opposing it. Nevertheless, one puzzle persists. What motivated the Norse to construct dwellings so ideally adapted for chillier epochs that had not yet fully materialized by the late Middle Ages? The North Atlantic region experienced a shift toward a colder and less stable climate, which later became associated with the era termed the Little Ice Age. The Norse colonists might never have coined a term for it, yet they grasped a concept equally vital: ready themselves for a tomorrow more severe than today. These sod homes transcended mere refuge. They emerged from meticulous study of wind patterns, soil composition, water flow, and seasonal changes. Rather than compelling the terrain to transform, they transformed themselves, and perhaps this was their finest accomplishment. The Norse are frequently recalled for their vessels, their plundering, and their conflicts, but their real brilliance lay in adaptability. They heeded the land's wisdom, gained knowledge from it, and as a result, numerous of their dwellings stood for centuries. They have bequeathed insights that continue to motivate modern architects and scholars. The mightiest societies are not invariably those that claim the greatest expanse of land. At times, They are those who master the art of endurance. If you found pleasure in exploring this overlooked segment of Norse history, rejoin us on Dark Origins, a place where archaeology, scientific inquiry, and history converge to uncover how past civilizations tackled remarkable challenges and why their most significant innovations remain relevant in our time.